When a billionaire landlord offers to erase your debt in exchange for dinner, you don't ask questions. You survive. But what happens when survival turns into something neither of you expected? Ethan Cole had 7 days before he and his daughter would be on the streets. No job, no savings, no options left. Standing outside Clara Vale's penthouse door that rainy November night, his hand trembling on the buzzer, he had no idea that the woman on the other side had been watching him for months. That she'd been waiting, that this desperate moment would become the beginning of everything. Stay until the end to see how their story unfolds. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story reaches. The eviction notice had been taped to Ethan Cole's door for 3 days before he finally pulled it down and read it. Final notice. 7 days to vacate. 7 days, 168 hours, 10,080 minutes until he and his 6-year-old daughter Maya would be homeless. Ethan stood in the narrow hallway of his Atlanta apartment building, the notice crumpling slowly in his fist. Behind him, through the thin apartment door, he could hear Maya singing to herself, some made-up song about butterflies and ice cream. She had no idea. How could she? She was 6. 6-year-olds shouldn't have to know that their entire world could collapse in a week. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's burnt dinner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering in that persistent, maddening way that made everything feel temporary. Ethan had lived in this building for 4 years. It wasn't much, 8 floors, 60 units, peeling paint in the stairwells, but it had been home. The only home Maya had ever really known. Now it was slipping away. "Daddy?" Ethan turned. Maya stood in the doorway, her curly brown hair escaping from the ponytail he'd attempted that morning. She wore mismatched socks and held her stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Yeah, baby? Can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" Ethan smiled, though it felt like his face might crack. "Sure thing, sweetheart. Go pick out a movie, okay? I'll start cooking in a minute." Maya nodded and disappeared back inside, satisfied. Simple pleasures. Mac and cheese and a movie. If only everything could be solved so easily. Ethan stuffed the eviction notice into his back pocket and followed her inside, locking the door behind him. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, which Maya had, and a living room where Ethan slept on a pull-out couch that groaned every time he shifted his weight. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person to stand in, but they'd made it work. He'd made it work. Until 3 weeks ago, when the restaurant where he'd worked for 5 years shut down without warning. No notice, no severance. Just a text message from the owner at 6 in the morning. Closing effective immediately. Sorry, man. Ethan had stood in his parking lot that day, still in his chef's whites, watching the health department seal the doors. Turns out the owner had been dodging health violations and tax debts for months. Everyone, cooks, servers, dishwashers, was out of a job overnight. Since then, Ethan had applied to 43 restaurants. 43. He'd gotten callbacks from 4 and interviews from 2. One offered him a position that paid $8 an hour less than his previous job. The other said they'd be in touch and never called back. Meanwhile, the bills piled up. Electricity, water, groceries, Maya's daycare, which he could barely afford even when he'd been working, and rent. 2 months overdue now. $3,000 he didn't have. He'd tried everything. He'd called his landlord's office a dozen times, left voicemails, sent emails. All he got back were automated responses and deadline extensions that kept getting shorter. Then 2 days ago, he'd finally gotten through to a human being. "Mr. Cole, I understand your situation," the property manager had said in that flat, rehearsed tone people use when they've had this conversation 100 times. "But the building owner has a strict policy. We've already extended your deadline twice. If payment isn't received by the end of this week, we'll have to proceed with eviction." "Can I speak to the owner?" Ethan had asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Maybe if I explain, Ms. Vale doesn't handle individual tenant issues. That's what we're here for." Ms. Vale. Clara Vale. Ethan knew the name. Everyone in the building did. Clara Vale was 30 years old and worth more money than Ethan could comprehend. She owned the building, along with a dozen others across Atlanta. She owned a tech company. She sat on boards and appeared in business magazines with headlines like "The Woman Who Redefined Urban Real Estate" and 30 Under 30, The New Titans of Industry. Ethan had seen her exactly 3 times in 4 years. Once in the lobby, stepping out of a black car in a tailored coat that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. Once in the elevator, her face buried in her phone, radiating the kind of focused energy that made you hesitate to say hello. And once at a building meeting about parking regulations, where she'd stood at the front of the room and spoken in clear, confident sentences that left no room for argument. She lived in the penthouse, 10th floor. The elevator required a key card to reach it. And now, standing in his tiny kitchen while Maya watched cartoons in the next room, Ethan made a decision. He was going to knock on Clara Vale's door. It was a terrible idea. Ethan knew that, but terrible ideas were all he had left. He waited until Maya was asleep that night, tucking her in with Mr. Floppy, the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and kissed his cheek. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby. Sweet dreams." He waited by her bedside until her breathing slowed and deepened. Then he slipped out, grabbed his jacket, and stepped into the hallway. The building was quiet at this hour, 10:30 on a Thursday night. Most people were settled in for the evening, watching TV, scrolling their phones, winding down from the day. Ethan's footsteps echoed as he climbed the stairs to the 10th floor. He'd left Maya alone before, but only for quick trips to the laundry room or to grab something from his car. Never like this. Never to do something that felt this reckless. But Mrs. Chen across the hall had agreed to listen for any sounds from his apartment, and Maya was a deep sleeper. It would be fine. It had to be fine. The 10th floor was different from the rest of the building, quieter. The carpet was thicker, the paint fresher. There was only one door set at the end of a short hallway with a brass number, 10A. Ethan stood there for a long moment, heart hammering against his ribs. What was he going to say? "Hi, I'm the guy who can't pay rent. Can you please not kick me and my daughter onto the street?" That would go over great. But he didn't have a choice. He'd exhausted every other option. This was it. He raised his hand and knocked. Nothing. He waited, counting the seconds. 30, 45. Maybe she wasn't home. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe... The door opened. Clara Vale stood on the other side, and Ethan's breath caught. She wasn't wearing the sharp suits and heels he'd seen her in before. Instead, she wore dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked younger like this, softer. But her eyes, sharp, green, assessing, were exactly the same. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was calm, polite, but there was a guardedness to it. People probably showed up at her door all the time, wanting something. "Ms. Vale," Ethan began, and his voice sounded rough even to his own ears. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Ethan Cole. I live in 4C. She tilted her head slightly, waiting. He swallowed. This was harder than he'd thought it would be. "I got an eviction notice. I'm behind on rent. 2 months. I've been trying to work something out with the property management office, but you came to ask me to stop the eviction," Clara said. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "I know how this looks. I know you probably get people asking you for things all the time. But I have a daughter. She's 6. And if we get evicted, I don't..." His voice cracked. He stopped, took a breath. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Clara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Ethan hesitated. He'd expected a lot of responses. Sympathy, irritation, dismissal. But not this. "Come in," Claire repeated. "If we're going to have this conversation, we're not doing it in the hallway." He stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind him. The penthouse was nothing like his apartment. It was open and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Atlanta skyline. The furniture was modern and clean, low couches, a glass coffee table, art on the walls that looked expensive. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly styled. It looked like a magazine spread, but it also felt strangely empty. There were no personal touches, no photos, no clutter, no signs that anyone actually lived here. "Sit," Clara said, gesturing to the couch. Ethan sat. Clara remained standing, arms crossed, looking down at him. "You're Ethan Cole," she said. 4C, single father. You worked at Augustine's until it closed. Ethan blinked. How do you... I know most of my tenants, Clara said simply. I know who pays on time, who doesn't, and why. I know you've been here 4 years and never missed a payment until 2 months ago. I know you have a daughter named Maya who goes to Riverside Daycare. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't threatening, exactly, but it was unnerving. You keep files on everyone? I keep track of my investments, Clara said. This building is an investment. The people in it are part of that equation. She moved to the window, looking out at the city. So when someone like you, reliable, responsible, suddenly stops paying rent, I notice. Then you know I'm not trying to cheat anyone, Ethan said. I lost my job. I'm trying to find another one, but it's hard, Clara finished. I know. The service industry is brutal right now. Too many workers, not enough jobs, and the ones that exist don't pay enough to live on. Ethan stared at her. He hadn't expected her to understand. Wealthy people usually didn't. Clara turned back to him. So here's the situation, Mr. Cole. You owe $3,000. You don't have it. Even if I gave you another month, you probably wouldn't have it then either. Am I wrong? Ethan's throat tightened. No. So eviction is the logical next step, Clara said. From a business standpoint, it makes sense. I can't run a building if tenants don't pay rent. I know, Ethan said quietly. I understand. But, Clara said, and Ethan's head snapped up, I'm not interested in the logical next step. She walked over to the kitchen, an open, gleaming space with marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, and poured herself a glass of water. She didn't offer one to Ethan. I'm going to make you an offer, Clara said, leaning against the counter, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Okay, Ethan said, his pulse quickening. I'll erase your debt, all of it. $3,000, gone. You'll stay in your apartment and I won't file for eviction. Ethan's heart leapt. You will? In exchange, Clara continued, her voice steady, you'll do something for me. And there it was. The catch. There was always a catch. What do you want? Ethan asked, his guard going up. Clara set down her glass. I want you to cook for me. Ethan blinked. What? Cook, Clara repeated. Real meals. The kind you used to make at Augustine's. I want you to come here 3 nights a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and prepare dinner. You'll eat with me. We'll sit at that table. She gestured to the sleek dining table by the windows. And have an actual meal. Not takeout. Not something reheated. A real, home-cooked dinner. Ethan stared at her, trying to process this. That's it? You want me to cook dinner? 3 times a week, Clara said. And clean up afterward. I'll provide the groceries. You provide the labor. It sounded too easy, too simple. There had to be more. Why? Ethan asked. Clara's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flickering across her face. Because I'm tired of eating alone. The honesty of it caught Ethan off guard. For a moment, Clara Vale didn't look like a billionaire or a CEO or a woman who owned half of Atlanta. She just looked lonely. I work 80 hours a week, Clara said. I go to meetings, I make decisions, I manage people, and then I come home to this, she gestured to the pristine penthouse, and I eat microwaved soup in front of my laptop. I can't remember the last time I had a meal that didn't come out of a container. She looked at Ethan directly, her green eyes steady. You're a chef. A good one from what I've heard. And you need help. So I'm offering you a trade. Your skills for my money. It's a fair arrangement. Ethan's mind raced. This was insane, wasn't it? Cooking dinner for his landlord in exchange for $3,000 worth of rent forgiveness? But what choice did he have? What about Maya? He asked. My daughter. I can't leave her alone 3 nights a week. Bring her, Clara said immediately. There's a guest room she can use. She can do homework, watch TV, whatever she needs. I don't mind. Ethan hesitated. And this is really all you want? Just dinner? Just dinner, Clara confirmed. 3 nights a week. We eat, we clean up, you go home. That's the arrangement. It still felt strange, but desperation had a way of making strange things seem reasonable. Okay, Ethan said finally. I'll do it. Clara's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed slightly. Good. We'll start Monday, 7 o'clock. Ethan stood, feeling like he'd just made a deal he didn't fully understand. Thank you, Ms. Vale. Really. I don't know what to say. Don't thank me yet, Clara said. Let's see if you can actually cook. It might have been a joke. Ethan wasn't sure. He headed for the door, then paused. Can I ask you something? Clara raised an eyebrow. You just did. Why me? Ethan asked. You could hire a private chef, someone with credentials and references. Why offer this to me? For a long moment, Clara didn't answer. Then she said, Because you knocked on my door. It wasn't a real answer, but it was the only one she gave. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over in his mind. Clara Vale, one of the most powerful people in Atlanta, wanted him to cook her dinner. In exchange, she'd erase his debt and let him stay in his apartment. It was bizarre, generous, suspicious, but it was also his only option. By the time the sun rose, Ethan had convinced himself it was fine. It was just cooking. He'd been doing that for 15 years. He could handle 3 dinners a week. What he didn't expect was how much it would change. Monday came faster than Ethan was ready for. He spent the weekend psyching himself up, planning a menu, going over recipes in his head. He told Maya they'd be having dinner at a friend's place a few nights a week, and she'd accepted it without question. Kids were adaptable like that. At 6:30, he and Maya took the elevator to the 10th floor. Maya clutched Mr. Floppy and chattered about her day at school, oblivious to Ethan's nerves. Clara answered the door in dark slacks and a white blouse, looking every bit the businesswoman, even in her own home. Right on time, she said. Then she looked down at Maya. You must be Maya. Maya nodded shyly, half hiding behind Ethan's leg. Clara crouched down slightly, her expression softening. I'm Clara. Your dad's going to cook dinner here a few nights a week. There's a room down the hall with a TV and some books. You're welcome to use it. Maya peeked out. Do you have coloring books? I don't, Clara admitted, but I can get some. Okay, Maya said, satisfied. Clara straightened and gestured to the kitchen. Groceries are on the counter. I wasn't sure what you'd need, so I bought a variety. Ethan walked over and stopped short. The counter was covered. Vegetables, fresh herbs, cuts of meat, dairy, spices, everything he could possibly want and more. It must have cost hundreds of dollars. This is a lot, Ethan said. I told you I'd provide groceries, Clara said. I meant it. Ethan set down his bag and got to work. He decided on something simple for the first night. Pan-seared chicken with lemon and rosemary, roasted vegetables, and garlic mashed potatoes. Comfort food. The kind of thing that made people feel like they were home. Clara sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, typing occasionally, but mostly just watching him work. It should have made him nervous, but there was something calming about the rhythm of cooking. The sizzle of oil, the smell of garlic, the precision of chopping herbs. Where did you learn to cook? Clara asked after a while. My mom, Ethan said, flipping the chicken. She worked 2 jobs, so I started making dinner when I was 12. Just basic stuff at first, spaghetti, grilled cheese, but I liked it. It made sense, you know? You follow the steps and you get something good at the end. Not like life, Clara said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. No, not like life. They were quiet for a moment. Then Clara asked, What happened to your mom? She passed, Ethan said. 6 years ago, cancer. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He didn't elaborate, and Clara didn't push. Instead, she said, My parents died when I was 22. Car accident. Ethan looked up, surprised. He hadn't expected her to share something personal. That's how I got the company, Clara continued, her voice even. They left it to me. I didn't ask for it, but it was mine. So I learned how to run it. That must have been hard, Ethan said. It was, Clara said. But you do what you have to do. Ethan understood that, more than she probably realized. By 7:30, dinner was ready. Ethan plated the food and set it on the dining table. Maya joined them, climbing into a chair and eyeing her plate suspiciously. What's this green stuff? She asked. Broccoli, Ethan said. You like broccoli? Not this much. Clara hid a smile. They ate in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable, but wasn't entirely awkward either. Maya asked Clara questions. Where did she work? Did she have a dog? Why was her apartment so big? And Clara answered patiently, without condescension. When the meal was over, Ethan cleaned up while Maya watched cartoons in the guest room. Clara helped, drying dishes and putting them away. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said. "It's my kitchen," Clara replied. "I should know where things go." By 8:30, they were done. Ethan collected Maya, who'd fallen asleep on the couch, and carried her to the elevator. "Same time Wednesday?" Clara asked. "Same time," Ethan confirmed. As the elevator doors closed, Ethan caught one last glimpse of Clara standing in the hallway, arms crossed, watching them go. And for the first time in weeks, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. Wednesday's dinner was easier. Ethan made braised short ribs with creamy polenta and roasted Brussels sprouts. Clara opened a bottle of red wine and poured 2 glasses without asking if he wanted one. He did. They talked more this time, about food mostly. Clara admitted she'd never learned to cook beyond the basics: toast, scrambled eggs, the occasional pasta disaster. "I once set off the fire alarm making popcorn," she said. Ethan laughed. "How do you burn popcorn?" "I got distracted by a work call. Next thing I knew, the kitchen was full of smoke." Maya giggled from the guest room, where she was coloring in a new book Clara had bought for her. By Friday, it started to feel like a routine. Ethan arrived at 6:30. He cooked while Clara worked or watched. They ate together. They cleaned up. He and Maya went home. It was simple, structured, safe. But something was shifting. Ethan caught himself looking forward to those dinners. Not just because it meant his rent was covered, but because it felt good to cook for someone who appreciated it. Clara never left food on her plate. She complimented his seasoning, asked questions about his techniques, actually listened when he answered. And Clara was different than he'd expected. She was sharp, yes, precise, but she was also curious. She asked about his life, his daughter, his plans. And sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, he'd catch her staring out the window with an expression that looked almost sad. One Friday night, after Maya had fallen asleep in the guest room, Clara refilled their wine glasses and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan nodded. "Sure." "Why are you doing this alone?" "Maya's mother, where is she?" Ethan took a sip of wine. He'd known this question would come eventually. "She left," he said, "when Maya was 2. We weren't married. We weren't even really together, honestly. It was complicated. But when she found out she was pregnant, we decided to try. And for a while we did. But she wasn't happy. She didn't want to be a mom. So one day she just left, packed a bag and walked out. I haven't heard from her since." Clara was quiet for a moment. "That must have been terrifying." "It was," Ethan admitted. "I didn't know what I was doing. I was 26, working double shifts, trying to figure out diapers and daycare. But Maya needed me, so I figured it out." "You did more than figure it out," Claire said. "She's a great kid." "Thanks," Ethan said, and he meant it. They sat in silence for a while, the city lights twinkling through the windows. "What about you?" Ethan asked. "Why are you alone?" Claire's jaw tightened slightly. "Because it's easier." "Easier than what?" "Than trusting people," Claire said. "When you have money, everyone wants something. A favor, an investment, a connection. It's hard to know who actually cares about you and who just cares about what you can do for them." "That sounds lonely," Ethan said. Clara looked at him, and for a moment her guard dropped completely. "It is." By the end of the 3rd week, Ethan realized he was in trouble. Not because the arrangement wasn't working, it was working too well. He thought about Clara when he wasn't with her. He wondered what she was doing, if she was eating properly on the nights he didn't cook, if she was okay. And when they sat across from each other at that dining table, bathed in soft light with the city spread out below them, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt seen, not as a struggling single dad or a former chef scrambling for work, just as Ethan, a person, someone worth talking to. And the way Clara looked at him sometimes, when she thought he wasn't paying attention, made his chest tighten in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't just about rent anymore, but Ethan didn't know what it was, and he wasn't sure he was ready to find out. One Monday night in early December, Clara opened the door looking different. She was wearing jeans and an old sweater, her hair down and slightly messy. No makeup. She looked exhausted. "Rough day?" Ethan asked as he stepped inside. "Rough week," Clara muttered. She dropped onto the couch and closed her eyes. "I had a board meeting that lasted 6 hours. 6. And they still didn't approve the budget." Ethan set his bag down and glanced toward the kitchen. "Do you want me to—" "Just sit with me for a minute," Clara said. Ethan hesitated, then sat on the opposite end of the couch. Maya had already disappeared into the guest room. They sat in silence. Clara's breathing slowed. For a moment, Ethan thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, "Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right and it still doesn't matter?" "All the time," Ethan said. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him. "How do you keep going?" Ethan thought about it. "I don't think about the big picture. I just think about the next thing. Make breakfast, get Maya to school, cook dinner. One thing at a time. If I thought about everything at once, I'd lose it." Clara smiled faintly. "One thing at a time. One thing at a time," Ethan repeated. She sat up, running a hand through her hair. "Okay, what's for dinner?" "Risotto," Ethan said, "and you're going to help me make it." Clara blinked. "I told you I can't cook." "Then it's time you learned." He pulled her into the kitchen and handed her a wooden spoon. "You're stirring. Don't stop or it'll burn." Clara stared at the pot like it might explode. "This feels like a lot of responsibility. You run a multi-million-dollar company. You can handle risotto." She laughed, a real genuine laugh, and something in Ethan's chest cracked open. They cooked together, Clara following his instructions with the same focus she probably brought to board meetings. She asked questions, made mistakes, laughed when she added too much cheese. And when they finally sat down to eat, Clara looked at her plate and said, "I made this." "You did," Ethan said. "It's terrible," Clara said. "It's not that bad." "It's terrible," Clara repeated, but she was smiling. They ate the slightly overcooked, overly cheesy risotto, and it was one of the best meals Ethan had ever had. That night, as Ethan and Maya were leaving, Clara walked them to the door. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For the risotto disaster?" Ethan asked. "For reminding me that not everything has to be perfect." Ethan met her eyes, and for a moment the air between them shifted. He wanted to say something. He wasn't sure what. But before he could find the words, Maya tugged on his hand. "Daddy, I'm sleepy." "Okay, baby, let's go." He picked her up and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Good night, Clara," Maya mumbled. "Good night, Maya," Clara said softly. Ethan looked back one more time before the elevator doors closed. Clara was still standing there watching them. And in that moment, Ethan knew. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. It was something real, something that terrified him, something he didn't want to lose. The realization settled over Ethan like snow, quiet, inevitable, impossible to ignore. He thought about Clara constantly now. During the day when he was job hunting, filling out applications at restaurants that all blurred together. During the evenings when he helped Maya with her homework, his mind drifting to the way Clara's eyes lit up when she tasted something she liked. During the nights when he lay awake on his pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling and replaying their conversations. This was dangerous territory. He knew that. Clara was his landlord. She was wealthy beyond anything he could comprehend. She lived in a world of board meetings and business deals, while he lived in a world of overdue bills and secondhand furniture. But none of that mattered when they were together in that penthouse kitchen, the city glowing through the windows, the smell of rosemary and garlic filling the air. None of it mattered when she laughed at something he said, or when their hands brushed reaching for the same dish, or when she looked at him like he was the most interesting person she'd ever met. It had been 6 weeks since their arrangement started. 6 weeks of Monday, Wednesday, Friday dinners. 6 weeks of watching Clara slowly transform from the guarded, isolated woman who'd opened her door that first night into someone softer, more open. 6 weeks of falling for someone he had no business falling for. December had arrived with a cold snap that made the Atlanta mornings feel sharp and unforgiving. Ethan had finally gotten a call back from a downtown restaurant, a sous chef position that paid decent money and had reasonable hours. The interview was scheduled for next Tuesday. If he got the job, he could start rebuilding his savings, get ahead on rent, maybe even take Maya somewhere nice for Christmas. If he got the job, their arrangement would end. The thought sat heavy in his chest as he rode the elevator up to the 10th floor that Wednesday evening. Maya chatted beside him about a project at school, something involving cotton balls and construction paper, but Ethan barely heard her. Clara answered the door wearing a dark green sweater that made her eyes look impossibly bright. Her hair was pulled back and she looked tired but pleased to see them. "Hey," she said, stepping aside. "Come in. It's freezing out there." "Hi, Clara." Maya bounded past them both, already heading for the guest room where Clara now kept a basket of toys and books specifically for her. "She's getting comfortable here," Clara observed, closing the door behind them. "Too comfortable, maybe," Ethan said, shrugging off his jacket. "I hope she's not being a nuisance." "She's not," Clara said firmly. "I like having her here. It makes the place feel less empty," Ethan offered. Clara's smile was sad. "Yeah, empty." They stood there for a moment, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. Then Clara cleared her throat and moved toward the kitchen. "So what's on the menu tonight, Chef Cole?" "I was thinking coq au vin," Ethan said, following her. "If you're up for it." "Is that the chicken and wine thing?" "The chicken and wine thing," Ethan confirmed, grinning. "It takes a while, but it's worth it." I trust you," Clara said, and the simple statement made something warm bloom in Ethan's chest. As he started preparing the ingredients, Clara settled onto her usual stool at the kitchen island, laptop open but ignored. She'd stopped pretending to work during their dinners weeks ago. Now she just watched him, asked questions, occasionally helped when he needed an extra pair of hands. "So I have news," Ethan said, chopping onions with practiced precision. "I got a call back for a job." He heard Clara's sharp intake of breath. "That's great. Where?" "Colette's, downtown. It's a French place, pretty upscale. They're looking for a sous chef." He glanced at her. "The interview's next Tuesday." "You'll get it," Clara said with absolute certainty. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. You're incredibly talented, Ethan. Any restaurant would be lucky to have you." The conviction in her voice made him pause, knife hovering over the cutting board. "Thanks," he said quietly. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she said, "So if you get the job, our arrangement ends." There it was, the thing neither of them had wanted to say out loud. "I guess it does," Ethan said, focusing very intently on mincing garlic. "I mean, that was always the deal, right? I cook until I can pay rent again. Once I'm working, I can pay." "Right," Clara said. Her voice sounded strange, hollow. The kitchen felt too quiet suddenly. Even the sizzle of oil in the pan seemed muted. "I'll miss this," Ethan admitted. The words came out before he could stop them. When he looked up, Clara was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'll miss it too." The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Ethan wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that these dinners had become the best part of his week, that he thought about her more than he should, that the idea of not seeing her 3 times a week made his chest ache. But Maya's voice called from the other room, "Daddy, can you help me with this puzzle?" And the moment shattered. "Be right back," Ethan said, setting down his knife. When he returned 5 minutes later, Clara was staring out the window at the city, her arms wrapped around herself. They finished cooking in near silence. Dinner was delicious, the chicken tender and rich, the sauce deep and complex, but neither of them seemed to have much appetite. They pushed food around their plates, made small talk that felt forced, avoided looking at each other for too long. Maya, oblivious to the tension, chattered happily about her day. Clara asked her questions, smiled at her stories, but Ethan could see the sadness lingering in her eyes. After dinner, while Ethan washed dishes and Clara dried, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What do you want?" Clara asked. "Not for Maya, not for anyone else. What do you want for yourself?" Ethan's hands stilled in the soapy water. No one had asked him that question in years, maybe ever. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been in survival mode for so long, I haven't thought about what I actually want." "Think about it now," Clara pressed. "If you could have anything, what would it be?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd saved him when he was drowning, who'd welcomed his daughter into her home, who'd somehow become the center of his world in just 6 weeks. "I want to stop feeling like I'm one mistake away from losing everything," he said slowly. "I want to give Maya a good life, a stable life. I want to wake up in the morning and not be afraid." "That's not selfish enough," Clara said. "What do you want just for you?" The answer came to him with startling clarity, but he couldn't say it. He couldn't tell her that what he wanted was standing right in front of him, drying dishes in her expensive penthouse, looking at him like his answer actually mattered. "I want to cook," he said instead. "Not just for a job. I want to create things, make people happy with food. I want to matter to someone." Clara set down the dish towel. "You matter to Maya." "I know, but I mean," he struggled to find the words. "I want someone to choose me. Not because they need me or because I'm useful, just because they want me." The air between them felt electric. Clara's green eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted. "Ethan," she started, and her voice was barely a whisper. But then Maya appeared in the doorway, Mr. Floppy tucked under her arm, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, I'm tired." The spell broke. "Okay, baby," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Let's get you home." Clara stepped back, creating distance. "I'll get her coat." The ride down in the elevator was quiet. Maya dozed against Ethan's shoulder, and Clara stood on the opposite side, staring at the doors. When they reached the 4th floor, and the doors opened, Clara caught Ethan's arm. "You matter," she said urgently. "I need you to know that. You matter." Before he could respond, before he could ask what she meant, she released his arm and the elevator doors began to close. Ethan stood in the hallway long after the elevator had gone, Maya sleeping in his arms, his heart hammering against his ribs. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan prepared for his interview, practiced answering common questions, pressed his one good dress shirt. He tried not to think about Clara, about the way she'd looked at him, about what she might have meant. But on Friday, when he arrived at the penthouse for dinner, something was different. Clara opened the door in a black dress and heels, her hair styled, makeup perfect. She looked like she was going somewhere important. "Am I early?" Ethan asked, confused. "No," Clara said. "But I need to cancel tonight. I have a thing." "A thing?" "A benefit dinner," Clara explained, grabbing a clutch from the hall table. "I'm sorry. I completely forgot it was tonight until an hour ago. I should have called you." "It's fine," Ethan said, trying to hide his disappointment. "We can do next week." "Right," Clara said. But she didn't move toward the elevator. She stood there, looking at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "After your interview." "After my interview," Ethan echoed. Maya tugged on his hand. "Can we get pizza, Daddy, since we're not eating here?" "Sure, sweetheart." Clara crouched down to Maya's level. "I'm sorry, Maya. I promise I'll make it up to you." "That's okay," Maya said generously. "You look really pretty." And Clara's smile was genuine. "Thank you, sweetie." She straightened, and her eyes met Ethan's. For a moment, he thought she was going to say something, but then her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. "I have to go," she said. "My car's waiting." "Have fun," Ethan managed. "I won't," Clara said. Then she disappeared into the elevator, leaving a trail of expensive perfume behind her. Ethan took Maya out for pizza at their favorite place, a small joint 2 blocks from their building that had red vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played oldies. Maya demolished 2 slices and half of Ethan's, then begged for quarters for the jukebox. While she danced to Build Me Up Buttercup, Ethan stared at his phone. He didn't have Clara's number. In 6 weeks of dinners and conversations and moments that felt like more than they should, they'd never exchanged numbers. The arrangement had never required it. But now, watching Maya spin in circles, watching other families laugh and eat together, Ethan felt the absence of Clara like a physical ache. He was in love with her. The realization didn't come as a shock. Maybe he'd known for weeks and just hadn't admitted it. But sitting in that pizza place, surrounded by the ordinary chaos of a Friday night, he let himself feel it fully. He was in love with Clara Vale, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The weekend crawled by. Ethan took Maya to the park, helped her build a fortress out of couch cushions, read her favorite book 3 times in a row, but his mind kept drifting to Clara. Was she at home? Was she thinking about him? Did she feel even a fraction of what he felt? Monday morning arrived, and with it, his interview at Colette's. Ethan dropped Maya at daycare, put on his pressed shirt and his best shoes, and took 2 buses downtown to the restaurant. It was sleek and modern, all white tablecloths and crystal glasses, the kind of place where entrees cost more than Ethan used to make in a day. The head chef, a stern woman named Michelle with close-cropped gray hair, walked him through the kitchen, asked about his experience, had him prepare a basic beurre blanc while she watched. "You've got good instincts," she said when he finished. "Clean technique. Where did you train?" "I didn't," Ethan admitted. "I'm mostly self-taught. I worked my way up at Augustine's." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "The place that got shut down?" "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "We'll call you by Wednesday, but between you and me, the job's yours if you want it." Relief flooded through Ethan. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "See that you don't." He left the restaurant feeling lighter than he had in months. A job. A real job. With benefits and steady hours and enough money to not just survive, but actually live. He should have been ecstatic. Instead, all he could think was, this is the end. That evening, he went to the penthouse alone. He'd asked Mrs. Chen to watch Maya for a few hours, telling her he needed to have an important conversation. She'd agreed with a knowing smile that made him wonder how obvious he'd been. Clara answered the door in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, no makeup. She looked surprised to see him. "Ethan, it's Monday." "I thought—" "I know," he said. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside wordlessly. The penthouse felt different without Maya there, quieter, more intimate. "How was the interview?" Clara asked. "Good, really good. They offered me the job." Clara's face lit up. "Ethan, that's amazing." "Yeah," he said, but he couldn't match her enthusiasm. Clara's smile faded. "What's wrong?" Ethan took a breath. He'd rehearsed this on the bus ride over, planned what he was going to say. But now, standing in front of her, all his prepared words evaporated. "I don't want this to end," he said simply. Clara went very still. "The arrangement." "Not just the arrangement," Ethan said. "This, us, whatever this is." "Ethan, let me finish," he said. "Please. I know this wasn't supposed to be anything. I know it was just supposed to be about rent and dinners, but it became more than that. At least for me. And I hope, maybe for you too." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," Ethan insisted. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that I look forward to seeing you more than anything else in my week. I'm saying that when I cook, I think about what would make you smile. I'm saying that I—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Say it," Clara whispered. "I'm falling for you," Ethan said. "Maybe I've already fallen. I don't know. But I know that the idea of not seeing you anymore, of this just ending, makes me feel like I can't breathe." Silence filled the room. Clara stared at him, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "You can't fall for me," she said finally, her voice breaking. "You can't." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Why not?" "Because I'm your landlord," Clara said, her voice rising. "Because you needed help, and I gave it to you. And now you think you owe me something." "This isn't about owing you," Ethan cut in. "This is about how I feel when I'm with you, how you make me laugh, how you listen when I talk like what I'm saying actually matters, how you bought coloring books for my daughter because you wanted her to be comfortable here." "Those are just things people do," Clara said, but there were tears on her cheeks now. "No, they're not," Ethan said. "They're things you do, you, Clara, not some billionaire landlord, you." Clara turned away, wiping at her eyes. "This is a bad idea." "Why?" Ethan demanded. "Tell me why." "Because I could hurt you." Clara spun back around. "Because people like me, people with money and power, we destroy things. We can't help it. And you have Maya to think about. You can't risk getting involved with someone like me." "Someone like you," Ethan repeated. "You mean someone who's been nothing but kind to us? Someone who gave me a chance when no one else would? Someone who sits on the floor and does puzzles with a 6-year-old even though she has a million other things she could be doing?" "You don't understand," Clara said desperately. "You think you know me, but you don't. I'm not a good person, Ethan. I make ruthless business decisions. I've fired people who had families to feed because it made financial sense. I've put profits over people more times than I can count. And yet you erased my debt," Ethan said quietly. "You could have evicted me." It would have been easier, but you didn't. Because I wanted you close, Clara admitted, the words bursting out of her. Because I'd been watching you for months, and I thought if I could just have this, have dinners and conversations and something that felt real, maybe I wouldn't feel so alone anymore. That's selfish, Ethan. I did it for me, not for you. Ethan's heart was racing. You'd been watching me? Clara laughed bitterly. See, this is why it's a bad idea. I'm basically stalking my own tenant, and you're… Clara, Ethan interrupted. He crossed the room until he was standing right in front of her. I don't care. You should care. I don't, he said firmly. I don't care that you noticed me before I noticed you. I don't care that you made a selfish decision. I care that when you smile, it feels like the sun coming out. I care that you remember how Maya likes her grilled cheese cut diagonally. I care that you look at me like I'm worth something. Clara's breath hitched. Ethan, please don't do this. Why did you invite me here that first night? Ethan asked. Really? Why did you let me in? Clara closed her eyes. Because when you knocked on my door, you looked like I felt desperate, alone, trying so hard to hold everything together that you could barely breathe, and I thought, maybe we could help each other. We did help each other, Ethan said, but it became more than that. You know it did. What do you want from me? Clara whispered. Ethan lifted his hand, hesitated for just a moment, then gently brushed a tear from her cheek. I want you to stop being afraid. I want you to admit that you feel this too. Clara's eyes opened, and they were full of fear and longing and something that looked a lot like hope. I do, she breathed. I feel it. I felt it for weeks, maybe longer. Then why are we fighting this? Ethan asked. Because it's complicated, Clara said. Because I'm still your landlord. Because people will talk. Because… Ethan kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. But Clara didn't pull away. She made a small sound in the back of her throat and kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. This is insane, she murmured. Probably, Ethan agreed. We can't tell anyone. Not yet. Okay. And if this doesn't work, if it gets complicated… Clara, Ethan said gently. It's already complicated. We can figure it out. She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she smiled, a real, genuine smile that made her whole face light up. I've wanted to do that for so long, she admitted. Yeah? Ethan grinned. How long? Remember that building meeting about parking 4 years ago? Ethan's eyes widened. 4 years? Clara blushed. You stood up and very politely told me that the new parking policy was unfair to single parents who needed to be able to come and go quickly. You had Maya with you. She was barely 2, and she kept trying to grab the microphone. You were so flustered and so earnest, and I thought you were the most genuine person I'd ever seen. And you remembered that for 4 years? Ethan said, stunned. I remember everything about you, Clara said quietly. The way you hold the door for Mrs. Chen. How you always take the stairs even though you live on the 4th floor, because you say it's good exercise. The way Maya laughs when you throw her up in the air in the parking lot. I've been watching you be a good man for years, Ethan. When you showed up at my door that night, it felt like maybe the universe was finally giving me a chance. Ethan couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. I'm in love with you, Clara said, and the words sounded like both a confession and a surrender. I've been in love with you for months, maybe longer, and it terrifies me. Join the club, Ethan managed, his voice rough. I'm terrified too. So what do we do? Clara asked. Ethan thought about his job starting next week, about the impossibility of their situation, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about the way Clara looked at him, the way she made him feel, the way his whole world had shifted on its axis in the last 6 weeks. We try, he said. We try, and we figure it out as we go. Clara nodded, her eyes bright. Okay, we try. They stood there in the middle of her perfect, pristine penthouse, holding each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. And for that moment, maybe they were. They tried to keep it quiet. That was the plan. whispered between kisses in Clara's penthouse, agreed upon with serious nods and promises to be careful. No one could know, not yet. Not until they figured out what this was, how to navigate the impossible complexity of a relationship between a billionaire landlord and her tenant. But secrets had a way of making themselves known. Ethan started his new job at Colette's the following Monday, diving into the controlled chaos of a high-end kitchen with the kind of focus he hadn't felt in months. The work was demanding, the hours long, but it felt good to be back in his element. Michelle, the head chef, ran a tight ship but was fair, and the other cooks accepted him quickly once they saw he could keep up. His first paycheck would come in 2 weeks, real money, enough to pay rent, catch up on bills, maybe even take Maya somewhere special for Christmas. But even as his life stabilized, even as the constant fear of eviction finally loosened its grip on his chest, all Ethan could think about was Clara. They still had their dinners, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but now they meant something different. Now when their hands brushed reaching for the same pan, they lingered. Now when they sat across from each other at the dining table, the air between them hummed with everything they couldn't say in front of Maya. Now, after Maya fell asleep in the guest room, they would sit on Clara's couch and talk in low voices, stealing kisses like teenagers, finding excuses to touch each other's hands, arms, faces. "This is ridiculous," Clara murmured one Wednesday night, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder while soft jazz played from her sound system. "I'm 30 years old and I feel like I'm sneaking around behind my parents' backs." "We are sneaking around," Ethan pointed out, "just not behind your parents' backs." Clara tilted her head to look at him. "Do you ever wish we'd met differently, under normal circumstances?" "What are normal circumstances?" Ethan asked, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her face. "I don't know. At a coffee shop? Through mutual friends? Anywhere that didn't involve a power imbalance and unpaid rent." Ethan considered this. "If we'd met at a coffee shop, would you have talked to me?" "Of course," Clara said, but she didn't sound entirely certain. "Really? You would have just walked up to the struggling single dad in the worn-out jacket and started a conversation?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "I like to think I would have. But honestly, I probably would have been too afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of you," Clara said simply. "Of wanting something I couldn't control. I'm good at business, Ethan. I'm good at spreadsheets and negotiations and making decisions that affect thousands of people. But this?" She gestured between them. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I," Ethan admitted, "but I like figuring it out with you." Clara smiled and kissed him, soft and sweet. These moments felt stolen, precious, like they existed outside of real time. In Clara's penthouse, with the city lights twinkling below and Maya sleeping peacefully down the hall, Ethan could almost forget about the rest of the world. But the rest of the world had a way of intruding. It started small. A woman in the elevator asking Ethan if he was seeing someone because he seemed happier lately. A neighbor commenting that they'd seen him going up to the 10th floor a lot. Mrs. Chen giving him a knowing look and saying, "That Ms. Vale, she's a good woman. Anyone would be lucky to have her attention." Ethan deflected, made vague comments about working off his rent debt, changed the subject. But he could feel the speculation building, the way people watched him a little too closely when he came and went. Then, 3 weeks after their first kiss, Ethan ran into Daniel Reeves in the building lobby. Daniel lived on the 8th floor and served on the building's tenant board, a small group of residents who met quarterly with Clara's property management team to discuss issues and concerns. He was in his mid-50s, a lawyer who wore expensive suits and had the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. "Ethan Cole," Daniel said, blocking Ethan's path to the stairs. "Just the man I wanted to talk to." Ethan shifted his grocery bags, trying to get around him. "Hey, Daniel, I'm kind of in a hurry." "I'll be brief," Daniel said. "I've been hearing some interesting things about you and Ms. Vale." Ethan's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you've been hearing, but you've been spending a lot of time in her penthouse," Daniel continued, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. "Several nights a week, from what I understand. And you were behind on rent, but suddenly that debt disappeared. Interesting timing, don't you think?" "I'm working it off," Ethan said carefully. "I cook for her, that's all." "Cook for her?" Daniel repeated, smiling in a way that made Ethan's skin crawl. Is that what they're calling it these days? What exactly are you implying? Ethan asked, his voice low. I'm not implying anything, Daniel said. I'm simply observing that a billionaire landlord forgiving a tenant's debt in exchange for private evening visits might look questionable to some people, especially if that arrangement involved any sort of coercion. Ethan's hands tightened on his grocery bags. There was no coercion. Clara offered to help me, and I accepted. That's it. Of course, Daniel said smoothly, but you have to understand how it appears. A powerful woman, a financially desperate man with a child to support. Some might say that creates an inherently exploitative dynamic. Some might be wrong, Ethan said through gritted teeth. Daniel shrugged. Maybe so, but perception matters, Mr. Cole, especially when it comes to people in positions of power. Miss Vale has built an impressive empire, but empires can crumble quickly when the wrong questions start being asked. Is that a threat? It's advice, Daniel said. Be careful, for both your sakes. He walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the lobby with his heart racing and anger burning in his chest. That evening, Ethan told Clara everything. They were in her kitchen. Ethan had just finished preparing chicken piccata while Clara sat at the island, and Maya was absorbed in a movie in the guest room. As Ethan recounted his conversation with Daniel, he watched Clara's expression shift from concerned to furious. That sanctimonious bastard, she hissed when he finished. He's been trying to get me to sell this building for 2 years. When I wouldn't, he started looking for ways to undermine me. What can he actually do? Ethan asked. Clara stood and began pacing. He can file a complaint with the building board. He can spread rumors, make accusations. He can make our lives very difficult. Our lives, Ethan repeated. So he's not just coming after you. He's coming after both of us, Clara said, because he knows that the easiest way to hurt me is to drag you into it, to make it look like I abused my position as your landlord. But you didn't, Ethan said. Everything we've done has been consensual. More than consensual. He stopped, took a breath. I'm the one who told you I had feelings for you first. Clara stopped pacing and looked at him. That won't matter to people like Daniel. He'll twist it. Make it sound like I manipulated you, like you felt you had no choice because I controlled your housing. So what do we do? Ethan asked. I don't know, Clara admitted, and the helplessness in her voice scared him more than anything. If we try to hide this and he exposes us, it looks worse. But if we're open about it, we hand him ammunition. They stared at each other across the kitchen, the dinner Ethan had made growing cold between them. Maybe we should stop, Clara said quietly. The dinners, everything. Maybe we should end this before it gets worse. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. You don't mean that. I do, Clara said, but there were tears in her eyes. I can't let you and Maya get caught in the crossfire of whatever Daniel's planning. You have a job now. You can pay rent. You don't need me anymore. This isn't about need, Ethan said, moving around the island to stand in front of her. This is about want. I want you, Clara. Not because you're my landlord or because you helped me. Because you're you. Ethan, no, he said firmly. I'm not letting Daniel Reeves or anyone else decide what we do. I'm not giving you up because some bitter lawyer wants to make trouble. What if he files a formal complaint? Claire asked. What if this goes before the board? Then we tell the truth, Ethan said. We tell them exactly what happened. That you offered me an arrangement, I accepted it, and somewhere along the way we fell for each other. That's not a crime. It's not that simple, Claire said. Why not? Because I'm rich, Claire's voice rose. Because people already assume the worst about people like me. That we buy what we want. That we use our power to manipulate people. And you're vulnerable. A single father who was facing eviction. How is that not a power imbalance? It was a power imbalance, Ethan agreed, in the beginning. But it's not anymore. I have a job. I can support myself in Maya. I'm choosing to be with you because I want to be, not because I have to be. Clara shook her head. It won't look that way to other people. I don't care what other people think, Ethan said. Do you? Clara opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. I've spent my whole life caring what people think, she said finally. My parents raised me to be perfect, to be the ideal daughter, the model student, the successful businesswoman. And when they died and left me the company, Everyone watched to see if I'd fail. Every decision I made was scrutinized. Every mistake was magnified. So yes, I care what people think. I have to. Ethan stepped closer, gently turning her to face him. What do you want, Clara? Forget everyone else. Forget Daniel and the board and what people might say. What do you want? Clara's green eyes were bright with unshed tears. I want you. I want to come home at the end of a terrible day and find you in my kitchen, making something that smells amazing. I want to watch terrible movies with Maya and teach her how to bake cookies, even though I'll probably burn them. I want to wake up next to you and not feel alone anymore. Then that's what we fight for, Ethan said. Together. Clara searched his face. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Ethan said. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and Ethan held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. They had 2 weeks before the storm hit. 2 weeks of stolen moments and whispered plans. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal while they both waited for the other shoe to drop. Ethan continued working at Colette's, where he was quickly becoming Michelle's favorite sous chef. Clara continued running her company, attending meetings, making decisions that affected thousands of lives. On the surface, everything looked the same, but underneath, they were preparing. Clara consulted with her lawyers, discreetly asking about tenant-landlord relationships and what kinds of complaints might be filed. Ethan documented everything: emails about the cooking arrangement, dates and times of their dinners, any communication that proved their relationship was consensual and transparent. They told Maya, in simple terms a 6-year-old could understand, that sometimes grown-ups who care about each other have to deal with difficult people who don't understand. Like when Tommy said I couldn't play soccer because I'm a girl? Maya asked. Exactly like that, Ethan said. But you told Tommy he was being stupid, Maya said matter-of-factly. Clara laughed despite the tension. That's one approach. The formal complaint arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ethan was at work when his phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Call me when you can. It's happening. He stepped into the walk-in freezer for privacy and called her back. Daniel filed a complaint with the building board, Clara said, without preamble. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the strain underneath. He's accusing me of using my position as your landlord to initiate an inappropriate relationship with a financially vulnerable tenant. The board has called an emergency meeting for Friday. What does that mean? Ethan asked, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. It means I have to answer questions about our relationship in front of a panel of tenants and property managers, Clara said. And depending on what they decide, I could face anything from a reprimand to being forced to sell the building. They can force you to sell? If they determine I violated ethical standards in my role as property owner, yes, Clara said. The board has that power in the building charter. Ethan leaned against the cold metal shelving. This is my fault. If I hadn't... Don't. Clara cut him off sharply. This is not your fault. This is Daniel being a vindictive ass because I wouldn't do what he wanted. You and I, what we have, that's real. That's worth fighting for. What do you need me to do? Ethan asked. Be there, Clara said. At the meeting, I want you there. Are you sure? Won't that make it worse? Maybe, Clara admitted. But I'm done hiding. If we're going to do this, we're doing it together, right? Ethan smiled despite the fear coiling in his stomach. Right, together. The next 3 days were agonizing. Ethan went through the motions at work, came home to Maya, tried to act like everything was fine. But at night, lying on his pull-out couch, he couldn't stop imagining worst-case scenarios. What if the board sided with Daniel? What if they forced Clara to evict him? What if being with him cost her everything she'd built? On Thursday night, Clara called him. Can you come up? She asked. I need to see you. Ethan got Mrs. Chen to watch Maya and took the elevator to the 10th floor. Clara opened the door before he could knock, pulling him inside and into her arms. They stood in her foyer for a long time, just holding each other. I'm scared, Clara admitted, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Me too, Ethan said. What if we lose? She asked. What if they decide against us? Then we figure something else out, Ethan said. I'll move if I have to. We'll find a way. Clara pulled back to look at him. I don't want you to have to move. This is your home, Maya's home. You're my home, Ethan said simply. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be. Fresh tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm, Ethan said. I'm terrified, but I also know that what we have is worth whatever happens tomorrow. Even if it's hard. Even if it's messy. You're worth it. Clara kissed him, soft and sweet and full of everything they'd been too afraid to say. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I should have said it before. I should have said it every day since I realized it. I love you, Ethan Cole. I love you too, Ethan said, and it felt like the truest thing he'd ever spoken. They spent the rest of the night on her couch, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for a future that might not exist, holding on to each other like they could keep the world at bay through sheer force of will. When Ethan finally left around midnight to relieve Mrs. Chen, Clara walked him to the elevator. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, promise me you won't regret this. Us. Never, Ethan said. Promise me the same thing. I promise, Clara said. The elevator doors closed between them, and Ethan rode down to the 4th floor with his heart in his throat. Friday arrived cold and gray, the kind of December morning that felt like the world was holding its breath. The board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the building's community room, a space usually reserved for birthday parties and holiday gatherings, now transformed into something that felt uncomfortably like a courtroom. Ethan arrived at 6:45, having rushed home from work to change and drop Maya off at Mrs. Chen's. The community room was already half full with board members and curious residents who'd heard about the meeting and wanted to watch the drama unfold. Daniel Reeves stood near the front talking to several board members in low tones. He glanced up when Ethan entered, and something like satisfaction crossed his face. Ethan took a seat in the back, trying to ignore the whispers and stares. Clara arrived exactly at 7, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. She wore a charcoal gray dress and heels, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked every inch the powerful businesswoman, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. Their gazes met across the room, and Clara gave him the smallest nod. The board chair, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, whom Ethan vaguely recognized from building events, called the meeting to order. We're here tonight to address a formal complaint filed by Daniel Reeves regarding Clara Vale's conduct as property owner, Patricia said. Mr. Reeves, would you like to present your complaint? Daniel stood, smoothing his tie. Thank you, Patricia. My complaint is simple. Ms. Vale, in her capacity as owner and landlord of this building, initiated a personal relationship with a tenant who was in financial distress and facing eviction. She forgave his debt in exchange for private services, creating a situation in which the tenant, Mr. Ethan Cole, may have felt coerced into a relationship due to his vulnerable position. Murmurs rippled through the room. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. This represents a clear abuse of power, Daniel continued, and it violates the ethical standards we expect from property owners. I'm calling for Ms. Vale to either divest herself of this building or face formal sanctions. Patricia turned to Clara. Ms. Vale, how do you respond? Clara stood and the room fell silent. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. Mr. Reeves is correct about one thing, she said. I did enter into an arrangement with Mr. Cole when he was facing financial difficulty. But what he's conveniently omitting is the nature of that arrangement and the timeline of our relationship. She nodded to one of her lawyers, who began distributing packets to the board members. What you're holding is a complete record of my interactions with Mr. Cole, Clara continued. Emails, documented agreements, even receipts for groceries. You'll see that our initial arrangement was purely professional. Mr. Cole would cook meals in exchange for rent credit. There was no coercion, no pressure, no suggestion of anything beyond that. So you admit there was an arrangement? Daniel interjected. I do, Clara said coolly. An arrangement that was clearly defined, mutually agreed upon, and completely transparent. Mr. Cole is a professional chef. I needed help with meals. It was a fair trade. And when did this professional arrangement become personal? Patricia asked. Clara's pause was barely perceptible. After Mr. Cole secured new employment and was no longer financially dependent on me. Our personal relationship began only after the power imbalance Mr. Reeves is so concerned about no longer existed. That's convenient timing, Daniel said. It's the truth, Clara said firmly. She looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Cole, would you please stand? Ethan's heart hammered as he stood, suddenly very aware of everyone's eyes on him. "Mr. Cole," Clara said, "did I ever pressure you into a personal relationship? Did I ever suggest that your housing situation depended on anything other than our agreed-upon arrangement?" "No," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the room. "Never. Everything between us has been consensual. More than that, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in years." More murmurs, these ones more sympathetic. "You understand that some might see your position as vulnerable?" Patricia asked Ethan gently. "That they might question whether you felt you had a real choice?" "I understand that," Ethan said, "but I also know what I feel. Clara didn't manipulate me. She helped me when I needed it, and somewhere along the way we realized we cared about each other. That's not a crime, that's just life." Daniel stood again. "This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the fundamental problem. Ms. Vale used her position of power to—" "I'd like to present additional evidence," Clara interrupted. She turned to the board. "This morning, I filed paperwork to transfer full ownership of Unit 4C, Mr. Cole's apartment, to him. Free and clear. No mortgage, no strings attached." The room erupted. Ethan's jaw dropped. "What?" he managed to say. Clara finally looked at him directly, and her eyes were bright. "You're not my tenant anymore, Ethan. As of this morning, you own your apartment outright, which means there's no longer any landlord-tenant relationship between us. No power imbalance, no ethical violation." "You can't be serious," Daniel sputtered. That apartment is worth at least $200,000. I'm well aware of its value," Clara said calmly, "and it's worth it to me to remove any doubt about the legitimacy of my relationship with Mr. Cole." Patricia was staring at the paperwork one of Clara's lawyers had just handed her. "This appears to be in order. Ms. Vale, you understand that by doing this, you're giving away a significant asset?" "I do," Clara said, "but Mr. Cole isn't an asset. He's a person I care about, and I'm done letting people like Mr. Reeves suggest otherwise." The room was chaos now, everyone talking at once. Patricia banged a gavel that Ethan hadn't even realized she had. "Order, I need order." When the room finally quieted, Patricia looked at Daniel. "Mr. Reeves, given this new information, do you wish to maintain your complaint?" Daniel's face had gone red. "This is a clear attempt to circumvent—" "It's a clear resolution," Patricia cut him off. "If Mr. Cole is no longer Miss Vale's tenant, then there's no violation of landlord-tenant ethics. Your entire complaint is moot." "This is ridiculous," Daniel snapped. "She's obviously doing this just—" "To what?" Clara asked, her voice sharp. "To prove that I care more about Mr. Cole than I do about property values." "Guilty as charged." Several people in the audience actually laughed. Patricia consulted quietly with the other board members for several long minutes. Finally, she turned back to the room. "The board finds that, given the transfer of property ownership, there is no current ethical violation to address," she announced. "Mr. Reeves's complaint is dismissed." The room erupted again, but Ethan barely heard it. He was staring at Clara, who was staring back at him, and the entire world had narrowed to just the two of them. She'd given him an apartment, a home, $200,000 worth of security, just like that, to prove a point, to protect him, to choose him. The meeting broke up in a flurry of conversation and speculation. People crowded around Clara, some congratulating her, others clearly skeptical. Daniel stormed out without another word. Ethan made his way through the crowd until he reached her. "Outside," she murmured. "Please." They slipped out a side door into the building's small courtyard, the December cold biting at their skin. The noise of the community room faded behind them. "You gave me an apartment," Ethan said, still trying to process it. "I did," Clara confirmed. "Clara, I can't accept—" "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "It's done. The paperwork's filed. The apartment is yours." "But—" "Listen to me," Clara said, taking his hands. "I have more money than I know what to do with. I own a dozen buildings, but I only have one you. And if giving away one apartment means that people like Daniel can't question what we have, can't use your housing situation against you, can't suggest you're with me because you have no other choice, then it's the easiest decision I've ever made." Ethan shook his head, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Clara said, "because you're right. This isn't about power or money or who owns what. This is about two people who found each other when they both needed it most, and I'm not letting anyone take that away from us. Ethan pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Clara whispered. They stood there in the cold courtyard, holding each other while the Atlanta skyline glittered around them, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt like they might actually make it. The fight wasn't over. There would be gossip, speculation, people who would always think the worst, but they'd made it through the first battle, together. The victory felt fragile in the days that followed. Clara's gesture had been bold, decisive, the kind of move that should have ended all questions. But Daniel Reeves wasn't the type of man who accepted defeat gracefully, and the building board's dismissal of his complaint only seemed to fuel his determination. Ethan signed the ownership papers for his apartment in Clara's lawyer's office 3 days after the meeting. The process felt surreal, page after page of legal language confirming that Unit 4C, the place he'd called home for 4 years, now belonged to him completely. No mortgage, no landlord, just his. "You okay?" Clara asked as they left the office. She'd insisted on being there, even though her presence wasn't legally required. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. They walked toward her car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people's houses. "I keep thinking about what this means. What you gave up." "I didn't give up anything," Clara said firmly. "I made an investment in us, in our future." "A $200,000 investment," Ethan said. Clara stopped walking and turned to face him on the sidewalk, her green eyes serious. "Do you know what I made last quarter? Just in dividends from my tech holdings?" Ethan shook his head. $4.2 million, Clara said. "And that's not counting salary, bonuses, or profit from my real estate ventures. So yes, $200,000 is a lot of money to most people. But to me, it's the easiest money I've ever spent." She took his hand right there on the busy Atlanta street, not caring who saw. "Stop thinking about the money," she said. "Start thinking about what it means. You have security now, real security. No one can take your home away from you. Maya will always have a roof over her head. That's what matters." Ethan squeezed her hand. "When did you become so good at pep talks?" "I'm a CEO," Clara said with a small smile. "Inspirational speeches are part of the job description." But as they drove back to the building, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The board had dismissed Daniel's complaint, yes, but the man himself hadn't disappeared. Ethan saw him occasionally in the lobby or the parking garage, and each time, Daniel's expression carried the same cold satisfaction that made Ethan's skin crawl. A week after the board meeting, Ethan arrived at work to find Michelle waiting for him in the kitchen, her expression grim. "We need to talk," she said. "My office. Now." Ethan's stomach dropped. He followed her through the gleaming kitchen to the small office at the back, his mind racing through possibilities. Had he messed up an order, violated some policy he wasn't aware of? Michelle closed the door and gestured for him to sit. She remained standing, arms crossed. "I got a call this morning," she said without preamble. "From a lawyer representing someone named Daniel Reeves. Ring any bells?" Ethan's blood ran cold. "He lives in my building. What did he want?" "He wanted to know if I was aware that my sous chef was involved in what he called an ethically questionable relationship with a woman who'd previously held financial power over him," Michelle said. "He suggested it might reflect poorly on the restaurant to employ someone with, quote, compromised judgment and questionable character. That's not," Ethan started, but Michelle held up a hand. "I told him to go to hell," she said bluntly. "And then I told him that if he contacted this restaurant again, I'd have my own lawyers involved. But Ethan, I need you to be straight with me. What's actually going on?" So Ethan told her everything. The eviction notice, the desperate knock on Clara's door, the arrangement that had started as survival and became something real. The board meeting, the complaint, Clara's dramatic solution. Michelle listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You're in love with her," Michelle finally said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Ethan said simply. "And she gave you an apartment." "Yes." Michelle shook her head, but she was almost smiling. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or the most insane. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? Ethan asked weakly. Probably, Michelle said. She sat down across from him. Look, I don't care who you're dating or how you met. Your personal life is your business. But this Reeves guy clearly has an agenda, and he's trying to drag you, and by extension, my restaurant, into whatever vendetta he's pursuing. I need to know if this is going to become a problem. It won't, Ethan said. I promise. Clara and I, we're being careful. We're not hiding, but we're not making a spectacle either. Daniel's just bitter because he lost. People who lose don't always know when to quit, Michelle observed. Watch your back, Ethan. And if this escalates, you tell me immediately. Understood? Understood, Ethan said. And Michelle, thank you for having my back. Don't thank me yet, she said. Thank me when we get through whatever shitstorm this guy's planning. Ethan left work that evening with a knot of anxiety in his stomach that hadn't been there when he'd arrived. He picked up Maya from daycare and headed home, trying to push his conversation with Michelle out of his mind. But when they reached their building, Daniel was waiting in the lobby. Mr. Cole, he said pleasantly. And young Maya, how lovely to see you both. Ethan instinctively moved Maya behind him. What do you want, Daniel? Just a chat, Daniel said. I wanted to congratulate you on your new property ownership. Quite the windfall. It's none of your business, Ethan said. Actually, it is my business, Daniel said. You see, I've been doing some research. Tax law is a hobby of mine, and I discovered something interesting about large gifts between unmarried individuals. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Gift tax, Daniel said, smiling. When someone gives you property worth $200,000, the IRS considers that a taxable gift. Ms. Vale will need to report it, and you'll need to account for it on your own taxes. I wonder if either of you considered that when you made your grand gesture at the board meeting? He hadn't. Ethan realized with sinking dread that neither he nor Clara had thought about the tax implications of the property transfer. They'd been so focused on removing the power imbalance, on protecting their relationship, that practical details had fallen by the wayside. Like I said, Daniel continued, clearly enjoying Ethan's discomfort, just wanted to make sure you were aware. Wouldn't want either of you to run afoul of federal tax law. That could be quite problematic. He walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the lobby with his heart pounding and Maya tugging on his hand. Daddy, who was that man? Maya asked. No one important, baby, Ethan said, though his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Come on, let's get dinner started. But as soon as Maya was settled with her homework, Ethan called Clara. We have a problem, he said when she answered. He explained Daniel's latest ambush, the mention of gift tax, the implication that they'd made a costly mistake. Clara was silent as he talked, and when he finished, she let out a long breath. He's right, she said quietly. I didn't think about the tax implications. I was so focused on making a statement that I didn't consider the practical ramifications. How bad is it? Ethan asked. For me, not terrible. I have accountants who handle this kind of thing. I'll pay the gift tax and it'll be done. But for you, Clara paused, you'll need to report the property as income. That could affect your tax liability significantly, meaning I might owe money I don't have, Ethan said. I'll cover it, Clara said immediately. Whatever the tax burden is, I'll handle it. Clara, you can't keep throwing money at every problem, Ethan said, frustration bleeding into his voice. Why not? I have the money. You don't. This is my fault for not thinking it through. It's not your fault, Ethan cut her off. And even if it were, I can't keep letting you fix everything. I'm supposed to be your partner, not your charity case. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and he immediately regretted them. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably. Is that what you think? Clara finally asked, her voice small. That you're my charity case? No, Ethan said quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. I'm tired of Daniel making me feel like I'm taking advantage of you, like I'm some gold digger who saw an opportunity and jumped on it. You're not, Clara said fiercely. You know you're not. I know you're not. What Daniel thinks doesn't matter. Doesn't it? Ethan asked. He called my boss, Clara. He's trying to cost me my job. He's digging into tax law to find ways to hurt us. How long before he finds something that actually sticks? Then we fight back, Clara said. We get our own lawyers. We make sure every detail is airtight. We don't let him win. I'm not sure we can beat him, Ethan admitted. He has time and money and motivation. What do we have? Each other, Clara said simply. We have each other, and that's more than he has. Ethan wanted to believe her. But as he stood in his apartment, legally his now, thanks to Clara, looking at Maya doing homework at the kitchen table, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting a losing battle. The tax issue turned out to be manageable, if expensive. Clara's lawyers worked with Ethan's hastily hired accountant to structure things in a way that minimized his liability. Clara covered the costs, despite Ethan's protest, with the compromise that he'd pay her back once he was in a better financial position. Which could be never, Ethan pointed out when they discussed it over dinner at the penthouse one Wednesday evening. Then it's never, Clara said, refilling his wine glass. I'm not keeping a ledger, Ethan. This isn't a loan. It's an investment in our peace of mind. Maya had fallen asleep early in the guest room, exhausted from a field trip to the aquarium. In the quiet of Clara's dining room, with the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, it was almost possible to forget about Daniel and his vendetta. Almost. He's not going to stop, Ethan said. You know that, right? He's going to keep digging, keep looking for ways to hurt us. Let him, Clara said. We've closed every loophole. You're not my tenant. Our relationship is public. Our taxes are in order. What else can he do? I don't know, Ethan admitted, but people like Daniel always find something. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. Are you having second thoughts? About us? What? No, Ethan said immediately. Never about us. I'm just worried about what this is costing you. Your reputation, your peace, your money. My reputation was built on making hard decisions that other people don't understand, Clara interrupted. My peace was non-existent before I met you, and my money is worthless if I can't use it to protect the people I love. She squeezed his hand. You're worth it, Ethan. You and Maya both. Whatever this costs, you're worth it. Ethan stood and moved around the table, pulling Clara to her feet and into his arms. She came willingly, resting her head against his chest. I love you, he murmured into her hair, even when you're being stubborn and throwing money at problems. Especially then, Clara said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. They stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. Then Clara pulled back and looked up at him. I have something to tell you, she said. I was going to wait, but I don't want there to be any more secrets between us. Ethan's heart skipped. What is it? I hired a private investigator, Clara said, to look into Daniel, to find out why he's so obsessed with getting me to sell this building. Clara, I know, she said. I know it's aggressive, but I'm tired of being on the defensive. I want to know what his endgame is. And, Ethan asked, did you find anything? Clara's expression was grim. He's been buying up properties in this neighborhood for the last 3 years. Small buildings, mostly. He's assembled almost an entire city block, except for my building. We're right in the middle of his holdings, and as long as I own it, he can't develop the whole block. So this isn't personal, Ethan said slowly. It's business. It's both, Clara said. He needs my building to make his development project work. When I refused to sell, he started looking for ways to force me out. The complaint about us, the tax implications, calling your work. It's all part of a campaign to make my life difficult enough that I'll give up and sell. That's insane, Ethan said. That's real estate development in Atlanta, Clara said dryly. The investigator found emails between Daniel and a construction company. They're planning a major mixed-use development, hotels, condos, retail space, worth millions, but they need my building to make it work. Ethan sat down heavily. So what do we do? We have leverage now, Clara said. Daniel's been harassing you, interfering with your employment, essentially stalking us. That's not just unethical, it's potentially illegal. My lawyers think we have grounds for a restraining order, maybe even a lawsuit. A lawsuit? Ethan repeated. Against a lawyer? Against a bully, Clara corrected. Yes, he's a lawyer. Yes, he'll fight back, but we have evidence now. Documentation. And more importantly, we have the truth on our side. The truth didn't help at the board meeting, Ethan pointed out. The truth, combined with me giving you an apartment, helped at the board meeting, Clara said. Now we combine the truth with legal action. We go on offense instead of defense. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. This was Clara in her element. Not the lonely woman who'd opened her door to a desperate stranger, but the CEO who'd built an empire. Strategic, focused, ruthless when necessary. "You're terrifying when you're like this," he said. Clara smiled. "Good. Daniel should be terrified too." The legal wheels began turning with the kind of efficiency that only serious money could buy. Clara's lawyers filed for a restraining order citing Daniel's pattern of harassment and interference. They sent a cease and desist letter to his office, threatening legal action if he continued contacting Ethan's workplace or spreading false information about their relationship. Daniel responded with his own lawyers, denying all accusations and threatening a countersuit for defamation. "He's bluffing," Clara's lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca, told them in a conference room that overlooked downtown Atlanta. "He knows we have documentation. Emails, phone records, witness statements from your boss. If this goes to court, he loses." "So why is he fighting?" Ethan asked. "Because he's hoping you'll back down," Rebecca said. "Litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Most people can't afford to fight someone like Daniel Reeves. He's counting on you getting tired and giving up." "We're not giving up," Clara said firmly. "Good," Rebecca said, "because I'd really enjoy crushing this guy in court." The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Daniel went quiet. No more ambushes in the lobby, no more calls to Colette's. It should have been a relief, but the silence felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. Christmas was approaching, and despite everything happening with Daniel, Ethan was determined to make it special for Maya. She'd asked for a bike and some art supplies, both of which Ethan had already purchased and hidden in Mrs. Chen's apartment. Clara had insisted on contributing, buying Maya an entire set of hardcover books about a girl detective that Maya had mentioned loving. "You're spoiling her," Ethan said when Clara showed him the wrapped presents. "That's what people who love her are supposed to do," Clara said. "Besides, I never had anyone to shop for at Christmas. Let me enjoy this." They were in Clara's penthouse, decorating a tree that she'd had delivered 2 days earlier. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, and probably cost more than Ethan had spent on Christmas in the last 5 years combined. Maya was in heaven, hanging ornaments and chattering nonstop about Santa and presents and all the cookies they were going to bake. She'd accepted Clara's presence in their lives with the easy adaptability of children, asking when Miss Clara would be coming for dinner or if they could visit her apartment to watch movies. "She thinks you're her friend," Ethan said quietly, while Maya was distracted with tinsel. "I am her friend," Clara said. "You're more than that," Ethan said. "To both of us." Clara looked at him, ornament forgotten in her hand. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want this," Ethan said, gesturing to the tree, the apartment, Maya giggling as she tried to reach a high branch. "Not just at Christmas, all the time. I want us to be a family." Clara's eyes went bright with tears. "Ethan." "I know it's fast," he said. "I know we've only been together for a couple of months. But I've never been more sure of anything. You, me, Maya, we fit. We work. And I don't want to keep dividing our time between my apartment and yours. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want Maya to have stability and a real home with both of us in it." "Are you asking me to move in with you?" Clara asked, "or asking to move in with me?" "I'm asking if we can figure out what us looks like long term," Ethan said. "Whether that's me and Maya moving up here, or you moving down to 4C, or finding someplace new entirely. I just know I want us together." Clara set down her ornament and crossed to him, cupping his face in her hands. "I want that too," she whispered. "I've wanted it for weeks, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you'd think I was moving too fast or trying to control things." "You're not controlling anything," Ethan said. "This is me, choosing you, choosing us, if you'll have us." "If I'll have you?" Clara laughed through her tears. "Ethan, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Both of you. Yes, yes to all of it." They kissed, soft and sweet, while Maya sang Jingle Bells off-key in the background. "Daddy, Miss Clara, look what I made," Maya called, holding up a paper snowflake. They broke apart, both smiling, and went to admire Maya's creation. For the first time in months, Ethan felt like everything might actually be okay. They had Daniel's hearing coming up, yes. They had logistics to work out and decisions to make. but they had each other, and that was enough. The restraining order hearing arrived on a gray Thursday morning, 2 days before Christmas. Ethan had taken the day off work, and Clara had cleared her entire schedule. They met Rebecca at the courthouse, an imposing building downtown that smelled like old wood and anxiety. Daniel was already there with his legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked ready for war. The hearing was held in a small courtroom before a judge who looked tired and unimpressed with everyone. Rebecca presented their case methodically: Daniel's harassment, the interference with Ethan's employment, the pattern of intimidation. Daniel's lawyers argued that their client had simply been raising legitimate concerns about ethical violations, that he had a right to question relationships that appeared inappropriate, that contacting Ethan's workplace had been an attempt to verify facts, not harassment. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, and called a brief recess. Ethan and Clara waited in the hallway, not speaking, just holding hands. When they were called back in, the judge delivered her ruling. "I'm granting a limited restraining order," she said. "Mr. Reeves, you are prohibited from contacting Mr. Cole directly or indirectly. This includes phone calls, emails, messages through third parties, and contact with his workplace. You are to maintain a distance of at least 100 feet from Mr. Cole at all times, except in common areas of your shared residential building where incidental contact is unavoidable." Daniel's face went red, but he didn't speak. "However," the judge continued, "I'm not convinced this rises to the level of stalking or harassment that would justify a broader order. Mr. Reeves, you've been warned. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said through gritted teeth. "This hearing is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Rebecca seemed satisfied, if not entirely pleased. "It's not everything we wanted, but it's something. He can't contact you anymore. That's the important part." "Will he actually follow it?" Ethan asked. "He'll follow it," Rebecca said. "Men like Daniel Reeves care about their reputations. A contempt charge would hurt his law practice. He'll stay away." Clara thanked Rebecca and walked with Ethan to her car. They sat in the parking garage for a long moment, neither speaking. "It's over," Clara finally said. "He can't hurt us anymore." "You really think so?" Ethan asked. Clara turned to look at him. "I think we've done everything we can. We've protected ourselves legally, financially, professionally. If Daniel violates the restraining order, he faces consequences. We won, Ethan." Ethan wanted to believe her, and maybe she was right. Maybe this was really the end of it. They drove back to the building in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Clara pulled into her reserved spot and turned off the engine. "Come upstairs," she said. "I have something for you." They took the elevator to the 10th floor. Inside her penthouse, Clara went to her home office and returned with a small box. "I was going to wait until Christmas," she said, "but I think you need this now." Ethan opened the box. Inside was a key on a simple ring. "It's a key to the penthouse," Clara said. "I know we haven't worked out all the details of living arrangements yet, but I want you to have access. I want you to feel like this is your space too. Yours and Maya's." Ethan looked at the key, then at Clara, and felt something in his chest crack open. "I love you," he said. "I don't say it enough, but I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Clara said. "And Ethan, we're going to be okay. All of us. I promise." She pulled him close, and he held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. And maybe she was. The next morning, Ethan woke up in his own apartment with Maya bouncing on his pull-out couch, announcing that Christmas Eve was only 1 day away and they needed to make cookies right now. He made her breakfast, helped her start a batch of sugar cookie dough, and checked his phone while the mixer ran. There was a text from Clara. "Board meeting this morning. Something about the building. I'll call you after." Ethan frowned. Clara hadn't mentioned a board meeting. He texted back asking if everything was okay, but she didn't respond. 2 hours later, his phone rang. "Ethan," Clara said, and her voice was strange, tight. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Daniel called an emergency board meeting," Clara said. "He presented a petition signed by 40% of the building's residents calling for a vote of no confidence in my ownership." "He can't do that," Ethan said. "The restraining order doesn't prevent him from participating in official building business," Clara said bitterly. "He didn't contact you. He didn't violate the order. He just went around us." "What does a vote of no confidence mean?" Ethan asked, though he was afraid he already knew. "It means if the board agrees, they can force a sale of the building," Clara said. "And Daniel's already made an offer, well above market value. He's basically bribing the board to take my building away." Ethan sat down hard on his couch. "Can he do that? Is that legal?" "It's legal," Clara said. "It's in the building charter. If enough residents support it and the board votes in favor, I can be compelled to sell." "When's the vote?" Ethan asked. 2 weeks, Clara said. January 7th. 2 weeks. 14 days to figure out how to stop Daniel from taking everything Clara had built, from destroying the home Ethan and Maya had found, from winning the war he'd been waging since the beginning. "We'll fight this," Ethan said. "We'll find a way." "I don't know if there is a way," Clara said, and she sounded more defeated than he'd ever heard her. "He's been planning this for months, Ethan, maybe years. And I gave him the ammunition when I gave you the apartment. Now he's convinced half the building that I'm too emotionally compromised to be a good landlord." "That's not true," Ethan said fiercely. "Isn't it?" Clara asked. "I gave away a $200,000 asset to protect my relationship with you. What responsible building owner does that?" "One who cares about people more than profit," Ethan said. "One who's human instead of a corporation." "Clara, you're not compromised. You're compassionate. There's a difference." Well, Clara was quiet for a long moment. "I need to think," she finally said. "I need to figure out our options." "Let me help," Ethan said. "I don't know if you can," Clara admitted, "but I love you for offering." After they hung up, Ethan stood in his apartment that Clara had given him, and felt the weight of everything threatening to crush them both. Daniel had been playing a long game, and they'd been so focused on protecting their relationship that they'd missed the real threat. He didn't just want to break them apart, he wanted to take everything. And unless they found a way to stop him, he was going to win. Christmas Eve should have been magical. Instead, Ethan spent it watching Maya decorate cookies while his mind spun through impossible scenarios, searching for a way to save Clara's building and, by extension, their future. Clara came down to his apartment that evening, carrying bags of presents for Maya and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They'd agreed not to let the situation ruin the holiday for Maya, who was vibrating with excitement about Santa's impending arrival. "Miss Clara!" Maya launched herself at Clara the moment she walked through the door, nearly knocking her over. "Hey, sweetheart," Clara said, catching her and lifting her up despite Maya getting too big for it. "Are you ready for Christmas?" "So ready," Maya announced. "Daddy and I made cookies shaped like reindeer, but one of them looks like a dog." "I'm sure Santa won't mind," Clara said, setting her down. Her eyes met Ethan's over Maya's head, and the worry there made his chest ache. They made it through the evening with forced cheerfulness, reading Christmas stories and watching holiday movies while Maya slowly succumbed to exhaustion on the couch between them. When she finally fell asleep, her head on Clara's lap and her feet in Ethan's, they sat in silence for a long moment. "I've been thinking," Clara finally said, her hand absently stroking Maya's hair. "Maybe I should just sell, take Daniel's offer and walk away." "No," Ethan said immediately. "Ethan, he's going to win anyway. The petition has enough signatures. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. Why drag this out?" "Because this building is yours," Ethan said. "You bought it, you improved it, you made it into something that matters. You can't just hand it over to someone like Daniel." "What if fighting costs us more than losing?" Clara asked quietly. "What if I dig in my heels and the board votes against me anyway? What if I lose the building and my reputation?" "You won't," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Clara looked down at Maya, sleeping peacefully between them. "She deserves stability. You both do. Maybe selling is the smart choice." "Since when do you make decisions based on what's smart instead of what's right?" Ethan challenged. Clara's lips quirked despite herself. "Fair point." They carried Maya to bed together, tucking her in with Mr. Floppy and the new books Clara had given her early. In the doorway of Maya's tiny bedroom, Clara leaned against Ethan. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've built my whole adult life on being in control, making the right decisions, winning, and now I don't know how to win this." "Then maybe we stop trying to win," Ethan said, "and start trying to do the right thing instead." Clara pulled back to look at him. "What does that mean?" I don't know yet, Ethan admitted, but we have 2 weeks to figure it out. Christmas morning was a blur of wrapping paper and squeals of delight as Maya discovered her bike and her books, and more presents than one 6-year-old could reasonably need. Clara had spent the night on Ethan's pull-out couch, and watching her help Maya unwrap gifts while still wearing yesterday's clothes and her hair mussed from sleep felt so domestic, so right, that Ethan had to look away before the emotion overwhelmed him. Later, after Maya had exhausted herself riding her bike in circles around the apartment complex parking lot and was napping with cookie crumbs on her face, Ethan and Clara sat at his small kitchen table with coffee. I talked to Rebecca this morning, Clara said. She thinks we should counterpetition, get our own signatures from residents who support me keeping the building. Will that work? Ethan asked. Maybe, Clara said, if we can prove that Daniel's petition doesn't represent the majority opinion. But it means going door to door, talking to every resident, asking them to publicly choose sides. That could backfire, Ethan said. Some people don't want to get involved in drama. I know, Clara said, but what's the alternative? Just accept defeat? Ethan thought about this. About Daniel's smug face in the courthouse. About the way he'd manipulated the system, used the building's own charter against Clara. About how much Clara stood to lose. What if we didn't fight him on his terms? Ethan said slowly. What do you mean? Daniel's whole strategy has been to make you look like a bad building owner, Ethan said. To convince people that you're too emotionally compromised, too personally involved, to do the job properly. So what if we prove him wrong? Clara frowned. How? By showing everyone what kind of owner you actually are, Ethan said. Not through legal arguments or counter-petitions, through actions. The idea was forming as he spoke, rough and unpolished but gaining shape. When's the last time this building had a real community event? Something that brought everyone together? I don't know, Clara said. There was a holiday party 3 years ago, but attendance was terrible. So we throw a party, Ethan said. A real one. New Year's Eve is in a week. We throw a building-wide celebration, free food, drinks, music. We invite everyone. And we show them that you're not some distant billionaire who sees them as dollar signs. You're someone who cares about this community. Clara was staring at him. You want to throw a party to save my building? I want to remind people why they live here, Ethan corrected. This isn't some faceless corporate property. It's a home. Your home, their home. And you've made it better. Remember when you upgraded all the common areas 2 years ago? When you added the new security system? When you kept rent increases minimal, even though you could have charged way more? Those were just good business decisions, Clara said. No, they weren't, Ethan said. They were choices you made because you care about people. Daniel's never going to care like that. His development will turn this whole block into luxury condos that none of the current residents can afford. But you? You've been protecting this community for years. People just need to be reminded of that. Clara was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. A party, she finally said. You really think that could work? I think it can't hurt, Ethan said. And even if it doesn't change the board vote, at least we'll know we tried everything. A slow smile spread across Clara's face. You know what? Let's do it. Let's throw the best damn New Year's Eve party this building has ever seen. The next 6 days were chaos. Clara pulled every string she had, calling in favors from caterers and event planners and suppliers. Ethan recruited his co-workers from Colette's to help with food prep. Mrs. Chen volunteered to spread the word to other residents and help with decorations. They transformed the building's community room and outdoor courtyard into a winter wonderland. String lights, borrowed heaters for the outdoor space, tables laden with food that Ethan and his fellow chefs prepared around their work schedules. Clara hired a band, not some expensive famous group, but a local jazz quartet that played at neighborhood events. This is costing you a fortune, Ethan observed on December 30th, as he watched Clara sign off on yet another invoice. Money well spent if it works, Clara said, and if it doesn't, at least everyone gets a good party out of it. Invitations went out to every unit in the building. Some people RSVP'd immediately with enthusiasm. Others were non-committal. A few, Daniel's supporters presumably, didn't respond at all. On the afternoon of December 31st, Ethan was in the community room kitchen, preparing the final dishes with help from 3 of Colette's line cooks, who'd volunteered their time. Maya was helping by taste testing everything and declaring it all delicious. Clara appeared in the doorway, and Ethan's breath caught. She wore a midnight blue dress that made her eyes look impossibly green, her hair swept up in an elegant twist. She looked like the billionaire CEO she was, but when she smiled at him, she just looked like Clara. "You clean up nice," Ethan said. "So do you," Clara said, taking in the button-down shirt and slacks he'd changed into. "Is everything ready?" "Almost," Ethan said. "Food's done, bar's set up, band's doing sound check. We're as ready as we'll ever be." People started arriving at 7. A trickle at first, then a steady stream. Ethan recognized faces from the building. The young couple from 3B, the retired teacher from 6A, the family with 3 kids from 5C. Even some of Daniel's presumed supporters showed up, curiosity apparently outweighing loyalty. Daniel himself was conspicuously absent, but Ethan hadn't expected him to come anyway. Clara worked the room like the professional she was, greeting residents by name, asking about their families, remembering details that most landlords would never bother to learn. Ethan watched her charm the skeptics and warm up the fence-sitters, and he fell in love with her all over again. Around 9, Ethan found himself talking to Harold from 7B, one of the residents who'd signed Daniel's petition. "I'll be honest with you," Harold said, nursing a beer. "I signed because Daniel made some good points. Building owner getting personally involved with a tenant, giving away property, it seemed questionable." "I understand that," Ethan said carefully. "But watching Ms. Vale tonight," Harold continued, "seeing how she remembers that my wife just had hip surgery, asking about my grandson's college applications, that's not someone who's lost perspective. That's someone who actually gives a damn." "She does," Ethan said, "more than anyone I've ever met." Harold nodded slowly. "Daniel's promising upgrades and improvements if his development goes through. But you know what? Ms. Vale's been making improvements all along. We just took it for granted." He clapped Ethan on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Ethan with a spark of hope in his chest. At 11:30, the band took a break and Clara stood up to speak. The room gradually quieted. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," Clara said, her voice carrying across the crowded room. "I know the past few weeks have been difficult. There's been controversy, accusations, uncertainty about the building's future. And I take responsibility for my part in that." She took a breath, and Ethan could see her hands trembling slightly. "When I bought this building 5 years ago, I saw it as an investment, an asset. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. You became more than that. I learned your names, your stories. I celebrated your good news and worried about your problems. And when someone I cared about needed help, I helped him in a way that some people saw as inappropriate." Her eyes found Ethan's across the room. "I don't regret it," she said firmly. "I don't regret choosing to be human instead of just being a businesswoman. Yes, I gave Ethan Cole his apartment. And yes, I did it partly to protect our relationship. But I also did it because it was the right thing to do. Because in my view, people matter more than profits." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Clara pressed on. "In 2 weeks, there's going to be a board vote about whether I should keep ownership of this building. Daniel Reeves has made an offer to buy it, and he's convinced many of you that his development plans would be better for everyone. Maybe he's right. Maybe a big luxury development would increase property values and bring in new amenities." She paused, looking around the room at the faces watching her. "But it won't be home," she said quietly. "Not the way this place is home now. Daniel's development will displace most of you. Rents will triple, maybe quadruple. The families who've lived here for years won't be able to afford to stay, and that breaks my heart." Clara's voice grew stronger. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I've also kept rent increases to a minimum, even when the market said I could charge more. I've upgraded security and common areas without passing the full cost to you. I've worked with tenants who fell behind on rent because I remember what it's like to struggle." Ethan saw heads nodding throughout the room. "So in 2 weeks the board will vote," Clara said. "And whatever they decide, I want you all to know that being your landlord has been an honor. Taking care of this building, this community. It's been one of the most meaningful things I've ever done. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives." She sat down to scattered applause that grew stronger, and Ethan saw more than a few people wiping their eyes. As midnight approached, everyone counted down together. When the clock struck 12, cheers erupted. The band launched into Auld Lang Syne, and people hugged and kissed and welcomed the new year with genuine joy. Ethan found Clara on the edge of the crowd, and he pulled her close, kissing her as fireworks exploded somewhere in the distance. "Happy New Year," he murmured against her lips. "Happy New Year," she whispered back, "whatever it brings." The party wound down around 2 a.m. Ethan and his crew from Colette's cleaned up the kitchen while Clara thanked the departing guests. Maya had long since fallen asleep on a couch in the corner, and Mrs. Chen had covered her with someone's abandoned jacket. When the last guest left and the building fell quiet, Ethan found Clara sitting in the empty community room, staring at the deflated balloons and scattered confetti. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I don't know," Clara admitted. "I think that went well, but I have no idea if it was enough." "It was enough," Ethan said. "You showed them who you are. That's all you could do." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "What if I still lose?" "Then we figure out plan B," Ethan said. "Together." The 2 weeks that followed felt endless. Clara went to work, Ethan cooked at Colette's, and Maya went to school, but underneath the normalcy, they all felt the weight of the approaching board meeting. 3 days after the party, Harold from 7B knocked on Ethan's door. "I'm withdrawing my support from Daniel's petition," he said without preamble. "And I convinced 5 other people on my floor to do the same. That speech Ms. Vale gave about people mattering more than profits, that meant something." 2 days later, the young couple from 3B stopped Clara in the lobby to tell her they were voting against the sale. One by one, residents began changing their positions. Not all of them. Daniel still had supporters who believed in his development vision, but enough that Clara's lawyers started to think they had a chance. The night before the board meeting, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay on his pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. What if they lost anyway? What if Daniel's money and influence proved stronger than Clara's humanity? Around midnight, his phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Can't sleep either. Come up?" He checked on Maya, deeply asleep with Mr. Floppy clutched tight, and took the elevator to the 10th floor. Clara opened the door in pajamas, her hair down, her face free of makeup. She looked young and vulnerable and beautiful. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," Ethan replied. They curled up on her couch together, not talking, just holding each other in the darkness. Outside the windows, Atlanta glittered with a million lights. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Clara finally said, "I need you to know something." "What?" Ethan asked. "You changed my life," she said. "Before you knocked on my door that night, I was so lonely I could barely breathe. I had money and success and respect, and none of it mattered because I had no one to share it with. You gave me something worth protecting, worth fighting for." "You gave me the same thing," Ethan said. "Hope. A future. Something to believe in besides just surviving." Clara lifted her head to look at him. "If we lose the building, we don't lose each other," Ethan finished. "That's not negotiable." "Promise?" Clara asked. "Promise," Ethan said, and he kissed her to seal it. The board meeting was held at 7 p.m. in the same community room where they'd thrown the New Year's party. Ethan arrived early with Clara, and they took seats in the front row. Rebecca, the lawyer, sat beside Clara with a briefcase full of documents. The room filled quickly. More people than had attended the original complaint meeting back in November, residents who'd heard about the vote and wanted to witness the outcome. Ethan saw Harold and the couple from 3B and Mrs. Chen and dozens of other faces he recognized. Daniel arrived exactly at 7, flanked by his lawyers. He looked confident, relaxed, like someone who'd already won. Patricia, the board chair, called the meeting to order and laid out the situation. Daniel's petition, the vote of no confidence, Clara's response. Then she opened the floor for comments. For the next hour, residents spoke. Some supported Daniel's development vision, talking about property values and economic opportunity. Others spoke passionately in support of Clara, citing her responsiveness as a landlord, her fair treatment of tenants, her commitment to keeping the building affordable. Harold stood and recounted how Clara had worked with him when he'd lost his job 2 years ago, letting him pay reduced rent until he found new employment. The young couple from 3B talked about how Clara had personally helped them when their apartment flooded, putting them up in a hotel at her own expense while repairs were done. One by one, stories emerged of Clara's quiet kindness, the ways she'd helped people without expecting recognition. Finally, Patricia called for the vote. All board members in favor of accepting Daniel Reeves's offer and forcing the sale of the building, please raise your hands. Ethan held his breath. 3 hands went up. 3 out of 7. All opposed? 4 hands rose. A simple majority. Clara had won. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Clara sat perfectly still for a moment, as if she couldn't quite process it. Then she turned to Ethan, and tears were streaming down her face. "We won," she whispered. "You won," Ethan corrected, pulling her into his arms. "You did this." Daniel stood abruptly and left without a word, his lawyers scrambling to follow. As he passed Ethan and Clara, Ethan saw defeat in his eyes for the first time. Patricia banged her gavel to restore order. "The motion to force sale is denied. Ms. Vale retains ownership of the building. This meeting is adjourned." More cheers. People crowded around Clara, congratulating her, thanking her. Ethan stepped back to give her space, and his heart swelled watching her accept their gratitude with genuine humility. Mrs. Chen appeared at his elbow. "You did good," bringing her back to herself, she said. "I didn't do anything," Ethan said. "You reminded her why people matter," Mrs. Chen said. "That's everything." Later, after the crowd dispersed and Rebecca left with promises to handle the legal paperwork, Clara and Ethan stood alone in the empty community room for the second time in 2 weeks. "I can't believe it's over," Clara said. "Believe it," Ethan said. "You're not getting rid of this building." "Or you?" Clara asked, a smile playing at her lips. "Definitely not me," Ethan confirmed. He took her hand. "Actually, about that, there's something I want to ask you." Clara's eyes widened. "Ethan?" "Not that," he said quickly, though his heart raced. "Not yet, anyway. But I want to make this official. I want Maya and me to move in with you. Really move in. Make the penthouse our home. All 3 of us together." "I thought you'd never ask," Clara said, and she kissed him there in the empty community room where they'd fought for their future and won. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. Ethan and Maya's belongings migrated slowly from 4C to the penthouse, clothes and toys and books filling the spaces that had been too perfect, too empty. Clara's sterile showplace gradually transformed into something that actually looked lived in. Maya claimed the guest room as her own, decorating it with her drawings and her new books, and the bike that she occasionally tried to ride indoors until Ethan stopped her. She adapted to the new space with the resilience of children, delighted by the big windows and the extra room to play. Ethan kept his apartment. 4C would always be his, a security he'd never take for granted, but he spent his nights in the penthouse now, in Clara's bed, her warmth beside him a constant reminder that the nightmare was over. 3 months later, on a mild evening in early April, Ethan came home from Colette's to find candles lit throughout the penthouse and Maya conspicuously absent. "Mrs. Chen's watching her," Clara said, appearing from the kitchen. She wore a simple dress and a nervous smile. "I wanted tonight to be just us." "What's the occasion?" Ethan asked, setting down his bag. "No occasion," Clara said. "I just wanted to do something special." She'd actually cooked by herself, which was both touching and slightly terrifying given her track record. The meal was simple but good, pasta with vegetables and chicken that was only slightly overcooked. "You made this yourself," Ethan said, impressed. "I've been practicing," Clara admitted. "You're not the only one who can cook in this relationship." They ate by candlelight, talking about their days, making plans for the weekend. It felt normal and domestic and perfect. After dinner, Clara led him to the balcony. The April evening was warm, and Atlanta spread out below them in a carpet of lights. "I have something for you," Clara said. She handed him a small box, and Ethan's heart stuttered. It was too big to be a ring, but it was definitely jewelry of some kind. Inside was a key on a silver chain, not a regular key, but a decorative one, engraved with coordinates. "It's the exact latitude and longitude of this building," Clara explained. "Where we met, where everything changed." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Clara, I know it's just a necklace," she said quickly, "and maybe it's cheesy. But I wanted you to have something that represents what we built together. Not just the building itself, but home, family, us." Ethan pulled her close, the necklace clutched in one hand. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "I'm not," Clara said, "but I'm trying to be the person you see when you look at me." "You already are," Ethan said. They stood on the balcony for a long time, holding each other while the city breathed around them. Somewhere below, people were living their lives, facing their own struggles, finding their own moments of grace. 6 months after that, Clara took Ethan and Maya to her family's cabin by a lake 2 hours outside Atlanta. It was a place she hadn't visited since her parents died, she admitted, too full of memories she wasn't ready to face. But now, watching Maya splash in the shallows while Ethan grilled dinner on the porch, Clara felt the ghosts of her past making peace with the promise of her future. That night, after Maya fell asleep in the cabin's guest room, Clara and Ethan sat on the dock with their feet in the water. "I want to ask you something," Clara said, "and I need you to really think about it before you answer." "Okay," Ethan said cautiously. Clara turned to face him, her green eyes reflecting the moonlight on the water. "Marry me." Ethan's breath stopped. "What?" "Marry me," Clara repeated. "I know it's unconventional for the woman to ask. I know we haven't been together that long by traditional standards, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Maya. I want to make it official, legal, permanent. So marry me, Ethan Cole. Please." Ethan stared at her, this brilliant, complicated woman who'd saved him when he thought he was beyond saving, who'd fought for them when it would have been easier to walk away, who'd given him not just a home, but a reason to believe in the future. "Yes," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. "Yes, absolutely yes." Clara's face broke into the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen, and she kissed him there on the dock while the lake lapped gently against the pilings below. When they told Maya the next morning, she screamed with delight and immediately started planning the wedding, complete with detailed drawings of her flower girl dress and a very specific vision involving sparkles. They married 6 months later by the same lake, in a simple ceremony attended by Mrs. Chen and Ethan's co-workers from Colette's, and Rebecca the lawyer and the residents from the building who'd become friends. Maya was indeed the flower girl, and her dress had exactly the number of sparkles she'd requested. Daniel Reeves didn't attend, which surprised no one. He'd sold his properties in the neighborhood and moved his development plans elsewhere, leaving Clara's building standing as a testament to what happened when humanity won over pure profit. As Ethan stood at the makeshift altar, just an arbor decorated with flowers that Clara had insisted on arranging herself, watching his bride walk toward him, he thought about that desperate night almost exactly a year ago when he'd climbed the stairs to the penthouse and knocked on a stranger's door. He'd been terrified then, broken, 1 week away from losing everything. He'd had no idea that the woman on the other side of that door would become his salvation, his partner, his future. Clara reached him and took his hands, and the officiant began speaking words about love and commitment and the joining of two lives. But Ethan barely heard them. He was too focused on Clara's face, on the tears shining in her eyes, on the way she looked at him like he'd hung the moon. "I love you," she mouthed silently. "I love you too," he mouthed back. When they were pronounced married and invited to kiss, the small crowd cheered, Maya loudest of all. And as Ethan pulled his wife, into his arms, he felt the final pieces of his broken life click into place. They weren't perfect. They'd faced challenges, money and work and the everyday struggles of blending a family. But they'd faced them together, the way they'd faced everything else. Because that rainy November night when Ethan had knocked on Clara's door, he hadn't just found a landlord willing to help him. He'd found the person who'd been waiting for him all along, the person who'd choose him over and over again for the rest of their lives. And Clara had found the same thing, someone who saw past her wealth and power to the lonely woman beneath. Someone who loved her not for what she could give him, but for who she was. At the reception, as Ethan danced with his daughter and then with his wife under the stars, he caught sight of Mrs. Chen watching them with a satisfied smile. "I knew it," she called over. "From the first time I saw you two together, I knew." "Knew what?" Ethan asked. "That you were each other's miracle," Mrs. Chen said simply. And she was right. That night, lying in the cabin's master bedroom with Clara curled against his side and Maya asleep down the hall, Ethan thought about miracles, about how they sometimes looked like desperation, how they arrived disguised as endings when they were actually beginnings, how sometimes, when you were standing on the edge of losing everything, the universe gave you exactly what you needed, not what you asked for, not what you expected, but something better, something real, something that felt impossibly like coming home. "What are you thinking about?" Clara murmured sleepily. That I'm the luckiest man alive, Ethan said. Clara smiled against his shoulder. Wrong. We're the luckiest people alive. That works too, Ethan agreed, and he kissed her forehead as she drifted off to sleep. Outside, the lake reflected the moon in perfect silver clarity. Inside, 3 people who'd found each other when they all needed finding most slept peacefully, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.